for every goal.
This is a Global Player original podcast.
I could have brought my mum. So we're listening in the car on the way down, and you made, I don't know which one it was you're with. And someone said they were going to Liverpool, and you went, good luck with that, or I'm saying a prayer for that. Well, she was like, this is the fella you're going to talk to. I said, honestly, I'll tell him, Mum.
Calm down.
Is he all right? And then you went on about not liking the Beatles. She nearly literally exploded.
I like to provoke people's mothers. I'm usually quite good with people's mothers.
She'll be fuming. She's now at Birmingham New Street on her way back to Lion Street. She'll be fuming all the way.
Right, we better get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's For the Many podcast, or this Monday's For the Many podcast. We might have 3 this week, actually, because tomorrow we've got Penny Mordaunt. And today, I'm absolutely thrilled to say we have my good friend Gillian Keegan with us. And obviously, normally on this podcast, Gillian, I have a sort of lefty woman with me.
Yes.
And no one could describe you as that, could they?
I don't know what they describe me as, to be honest. It's probably better not to ask sometimes. I'm not feeling that exclusive. I mean, you've got 3 in a week, literally.
Well, yeah, the third, I'm not sure if we're going to do it, because we normally do this on Monday and Thursday.
Yeah.
But given that this conference is not on Thursday, so we've got you today and Penny tomorrow, so I don't know whether we're going to do a normal one on Thursday or not.
Am I not a normal one? Is that
you're
like...
terribly abnormal. I had somebody on Twitter this morning saying, oh, well, that's going to be balanced then. And I said, you mistake me for someone who works at the BBC. I can have on who I damn well like.
Well, and also, people do have different views, right? And then all those people who pretend to be impartial suddenly are no longer impartial.
Well, exactly.
And they're, chiefs of
staff. And I'm
staff,
sure there's something over the next hour that you and I can disagree about.
Definitely. Well, your view of Liverpool. You've upset my mother, as I said.
that was a tongue-in-cheek comment. I've grown to like Liverpool more than I did on my first
If you don't
visit.
love it, you don't know it. That's all I can say. I'll take you on a good night out there. That will actually...
Oh, I've had a few good nights out in Liverpool. And there's some really good restaurants.
Yeah.
But I was cancelled in Liverpool this year.
Yeah,
So,
they don't take criticism well.
No, well, it wasn't even criticism. It's because I had the temerity to publish a book 8 years ago by somebody who, well, Norman Bettison, need I say more? That obviously I've now become a non-person. But that's another story.
Yeah.
We are in sunny Birmingham, which of course, if Jackie Smith were here, she'd be telling us it was Britain's second city, which in theory it is by population.
Well, it's certainly not sunny, but it is drizzling.
No, it is. Yeah, it's been a bit sort of moist, hasn't it?
Yeah,
all the time?
yeah, not good for the hair. Well, it's all right for yours, probably.
Now, you were, how can I put this? Well, you lost the election. You lost your seat.
Yeah.
Which I don't think anyone was really expecting, were you?
Not expecting, but I knew it was a very volatile election, and I knew that there was large boundary changes. I knew that there was tactical voting being edged, and I knew that it was a target seat for the Lib Dems. So I would say it was like 50-50, but and we'd been working the seat very hard because of all the headwinds that we had with. Well, all the things we had to do in government, really, which made us unpopular in some ways. But I didn't really think that I would lose the seat until probably that day.
Right.
It was quite difficult to judge because there'd been such big boundary changes, and I'd gone from having quite a big spread out seat across that part of Sussex to having the city and the coast. There was a big sewage campaign as well, which didn't help. All of the planning and housing issues were in those. I was literally in the shit. And I was kept saying to people, I've been the MP here since 2017. No one mentioned sewage in 2017 or 2019, not a single person. What's changed? Do we go to the toilet more? Obviously not. But it was obviously that effective campaign by the Lib Dems. So you never know. I've never taken anything for granted in my life, so I just worked as hard as I could. But that night I knew, and luckily I knew before I went. So I had some people there, and they were looking, and they could tell. So I've always done a winning speech and a losing speech. I just took the losing speech and got on with it. And I'm a very pragmatic person. I mean, I think I've said before, I didn't politics wasn't my goal in life. It wasn't my big dream, which it is for a lot of people. It was kind of quite random how I got into politics. I absolutely loved it. I think I did it all right, but I loved it. But it's not like it's, a real sort of big, major part of my identity. I'd probably describe myself more as a business person, really, than a politician, because I did 30 years in business and 10 years in politics, 7 years at national level.
But you are here at this conference,
yes,
which a lot of your former colleagues are not, for totally understandable reasons. Does that indicate you want to come back?
No, it indicates I'm a loyal person. And I just think when the chips are down, I think it's the most important thing is to reach out when the chips is down. I always did it when I was in business. If somebody was made redundant, that would be the moment I would always reach out to them. Yep. It's the moment you're at your lowest ebb, the moment you're most down, the moment you need that, and the moment it's most meaningful. And I'm very grateful to the Conservative Party. My first, you've been asking people, you've been to conference since 1980, whatever. My first one was 2014, and I remember coming, and I was little overall.
Practically a conference virgin.
Yeah, well, I've been doing 10 years of them, but I haven't.
My 37th.
Exactly, right. So I haven't exactly got bored of them. But the first one, I remember, I was with Andrew Tyree, and we were writing, and he was helping me write the leaflet.
He was your predecessor.
He was my predecessor in Chichester. He was the MP for Chichester at the time, and I was standing for the district council in Chichester, and I was saying, do you think I can do it? And he said, yeah, and he was helping me write my leaflet. That was 10 years ago. It's been such a massively quick journey, and then it was over quick. In some ways, I don't know. Psychologically, I think you can get your head around it either way, but all the things that I did, which were the last time, like the last oral parliamentary questions, the last cabinet meeting, I never knew any of them were the last. So in a way, there's nothing to sit and dwell on, really.
What can you tell us about that last cabinet meeting? Because I've heard all sorts of different versions of what went on, where Rishi sort of just informs you all that, well, he's been to see the King, we're going to have an election, don't really care. Well, you obviously didn't say I don't really care what you lot think, but it's kind of danced about face, wasn't it? I mean,
it was done deal. It was a done deal.
He should have consulted the cabinet before going to the palace.
Well, he didn't do that, and he had been to the palace. He had told the King. They had put the lectern outside. He told us, and he had spoken to a couple of people and asked them to speak before to support him. So they said they're supportive, this is as good a time as any kind of thing. None of us believed that, I think. None of us could understand why we were going right then. And then Esther said, well, go and tell them something else. I said, he's been to tell the King, you can't not do it now, right? But it was a surprise. Well, no, it wasn't a complete surprise, because there'd been rumours about it that week. Yeah. But you know what it's like in Parliament. There's always rumours, and only half of them are true. It's like advertising; you just don't know which half is right and or working. So there had been rumours, and it was an odd time for a cabinet meeting, if I remember. The schedule had changed as well. There was a reason why that had happened. So, but it was a done deal. And then obviously we all had to sit and watch whilst he went out, and then
oh my God,
it started pissing down.
Moment.
And I couldn't believe it. We're all sat there. I said, just turn around and say, well, at least I'm not a fair weather politician, or tell the fella at the top to put "It's Raining Men" or something on. He's got the real tune on. Put something else. You can come up with something to say when you don't just pretend it's not raining and there isn't a guy sort of playing.
But I wonder whether he realised, because I mean, obviously we could all see his suit looks absolutely sodden through. But I mean, I'm sure it's a very thick suit, so maybe he didn't quite realise at the time. I don't know.
Possibly not. Although, I mean, even though he's obviously got a good head of hair, you would know it's raining, right? Really, I mean, it wasn't like just soft rain. Yeah. It was raining. I mean, he looks good in rain. I think you could say that. I mean, his hair didn't move. I would literally look like Kevin Keegan. I would literally I'd have a perm in front of your eyes. My hair would be getting curlier and curlier and curlier. So no, I wouldn't have. I'd have put a hat on or something. But it was unfortunate. And then obviously that was the start of the campaign, which I don't know whether the campaign ever could have made up the 20 points, right? But certainly the campaign didn't go well at all, right? Everything that could have gone wrong pretty much went wrong.
So the day after you've lost, I mean, you either view that as a really real threat to the rest of your life, you can wallow in self-pity, or you think, okay, well, I'm still of an age where I can have another career, or I want to go, I'm going to try and get back into Parliament. How did you process all of that?
I am a super pragmatic person, always have been. And I thought to myself, you know what? You've had a career that you never thought you were going to have. You never thought you'd be an MP. And when I became an MP, I never thought I'd be a minister. And when I became a minister, I never thought I'd be a cabinet minister.
I did.
So I guess...
I was the only one to predict in that reshuffle that you'd get a cabinet post. None of the other journalists did.
No, and I was surprised as well. And actually, Rishi said to me when I went in, he said, this is going to be the highlight of my day. He said it could even be the highlight of my career, because I know you're not expecting this at all. Everybody else is positioning for things and you're not expecting this at all. Will you be my education secretary? I was like, wow, I mean, that is... And I tell you, the reason I wasn't expecting it is I hadn't washed my hair and I had flat shoes on. And
just as well it wasn't raining. Eh?
I thought I'd get back to a Minister of State, because I had been a Minister of State and then got demoted. I thought maybe I'd get back to that. So I guess when you're in that position, you just feel incredibly grateful. None of my life did I ever feel I'd be getting these opportunities. So I don't feel at all, no bitterness. I'm incredibly grateful that I did it. And I got to do something that not many people do, but I did celebrate my 40th year of starting work full-time on the 3rd of September this year. And I kind of feel like I've done a lot of work, so I'm now taking a bit of a break, and Michael, my husband's also got a bit of time because he's finishing the end of his PhD. So it's the first time we've both had time together. So we are taking a break and just getting a bit fit, healthy.
Done a lot of travelling, I think.
Doing a lot of travelling, yeah.
Where have you been?
Well, I mean, I've lived in Madrid for 8 years, so I got a place in Spain 20 odd years ago. Last year, the Telegraph came on holiday with me. This year, it was nice to go on my own. Yeah, I know. They were knocking on all my neighbours' doors, and not one of them knew I was an MP, because I hadn't told them. They all still thought I worked in Madrid, and because I hadn't. I mean, they don't watch English TV, right? They're all Spanish, so they're all knocking, trying to find me. Anyway, they now all do know that I'm an MP, so I had to get my political Spanish up, because they all wanted to know what had happened, what had happened now in British politics. So I went there, and we did my dad's 80th birthday. So we had everybody out there, and we had a wonderful time. And we spent, instead of just spending 4 days, which is what I was planned to do when I was still thinking I'd be the education secretary, doing exams, doing GCSEs, doing A-levels, we spent nearly 4 weeks there.
I think you've got exactly the right attitude to it all. Sort of think, well, I did it, what was it, for 7, 8 years?
7 years national, 3 years as a local.
One of your colleagues, who I won't name, but I've known for a long time, I sent her a sort of commiseration message, and she sent back a very sort of woe is me, sad message, which I completely understood. And I just responded and said, look, you got in there. You had, I think she'd been in 7 years, maybe 10 years. I said, some of us never made it. Some of us would have loved to have done
100%.
it. But we never have. You always have that to look back on. And now just think of the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, I always think of my predecessor. So he did 20 years in Parliament, and he's fantastic, super smart. But because of the timing of his years, because he got in 97, he kind of missed the ministerial bit, because the first 13 years of his political career, they were in opposition. So timing's something, you just can't dictate in politics. I mean, when you get the shot, you can't say, oh no, I'll wait till next time. Literally, it's normally a one-off thing. I mean, you might get a second chance, but it's not often. So you've just got to go for it and see where it takes you. And, one of the things that I was really keen to do was put apprenticeships on the map, and particularly higher level and degree apprenticeships on the map. And even Boris said to me one time, he said, I went to a dinner party, Gillian, 3 people mentioned degree apprenticeships, your work is done. These people are now talking about these fantastic options that you've got, as well as going to university. So just the small number of things that you can bring that will change and are changing those people who are going on those courses, then, that's all you can hope for, really.
Most MPs can look back and think, I changed the law in some way. Like Anna Firth, who came in and obviously succeeded David Amess, so I think she was only there for 18 months. She got her pet abduction bill
Yes.
through, and I thought, well, what a great thing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was obviously devastated to have lost. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing her later. I mean, I'm doing a little speech at the Conservative Animal Welfare Society, and she got me involved in that. And I think, I mean, Lynn Featherstone, she can look back. I mean, when she was a minister, and think, well, if equal marriage would not have happened without me.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't.
And a lot of private member bills have that capability. And if you've got a private member bill and the government will support it. So I was in the lucky position of supporting the Down Syndrome Act, which was a Liam Fox private members bill, which was to improve the support for people with Down syndrome and their families. And because I have a nephew with Down syndrome, it just was a no-brainer. And sometimes you think you're in the right place at the right time, because nobody wanted to do it, nobody wanted to support it, but because I had personal experience, I thought actually, and I also had experience of what had happened in the pandemic, and I thought, no, this is something that we do need to put a spotlight on, because there's only 47,000 people, but they don't really have a voice. So you can, if you're in the right place at the right time. You never know whether that's going to happen, but you do know that if you're on the pitch, you've got a better shot of that happening. And then when you're off the pitch, then that's it, right? You know, I mean, some of my colleagues, because it was such an unusual election, such a volatile electorate and very volatile politics, and I predict that this is going to be the pattern for the future as well. There may be, you know, because there's so many of the seats are marginal for all parties, really, that I think maybe quite a few of them will be tempted to stand again, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that John Curtis, I think, at the conference today, has said that he thinks that two-party politics is now over.
Possibly because of
no one can predict what will happen in this election.
The first past the post system and the proportional representation and that sort of debate is there's been a sort of, there's tactical voting websites, and that kind of approach has it's like a DIY version of it in a way, and I don't know whether that will happen and continue to happen in future. Obviously there was quite a lot of people that wanted to get the Conservatives out, and you know the reasons could be different, and you'd find different reasons on the doorstep. Some of them loved Boris and were sorry he was gone. Some of them thought Boris was a disgrace and, you know, what he'd done, blah blah blah. Pretty much all of them thought Liz was a disgrace, if I'm honest. Nobody had much support for her, or, you know, people were unhappy with aspects of what we'd done in the pandemic, and there was somebody who had a view about everything, because obviously it had been such a tumultuous time. Brexit and pandemic, I mean, they're two events that, you know, you would hope don't come along in most political lifetimes. To get two of them within 2 years or 3 years was really quite the experience, and I think most of us who were in will feel that those 7 years were like, you know, 20 years really.
So is that it with you in politics? Because Grant Shapps he wants to stand again. Penny, I think, wants to stand again. Have you actually made a decision?
Well, I'm 56, and I think the next 5 years for me will be quite formative as to what I do in my last bit of my career. So I feel kind of waiting around for 5 years, and then I'd be 61, and maybe we'd get back in, maybe we wouldn't, and then it'd be 5 years, 66. It seems like a lot of time, which will be my last, probably, you know, whatever I do for the next 5 or 10 years. I was speaking to somebody who's an executive coach, and he was one of my professors at London Business School, and he reached out to me, and I've had so many people who've been so helpful, and he said to me, here's what you're going to do. He said, you've had amazing experiences in business, and not many people have got to the top of business and the top of politics. The next 10 years are going to be the best 10 years of your entire life. That's what you need to make sure. And I don't know how to do that if I'm hanging around waiting, you know, so I think that is actually what I'm going to try and do.
Well, I've had people here say to me, you will try again next time, won't you? And I said, no, I'll be 66 or 67. And I mean, I can't think of any MP who's been elected for the first time at that age. And I mean, I'm sure people mean it in a nice way, and they probably do genuinely mean it, but after the experience this year, there is no way that I would anyway.
That was unlucky.
Age should, well, it wasn't unlucky, it's my own doing.
It was.
But if age should not be a barrier to elected politics. And if you look at most other countries, people get started in their 50s or early 60s because they've had experience which they can bring to politics. Here we have a very different culture where if you're not in Parliament by the time you're 40, 45, generally you're written off.
Well, I didn't start till I was 49, and it is funny
Always
because
exception.
there is, but and I started work at 16, so obviously I came with a lot of business experience already. But it is something that worries me. I mean, you look at, the first bit of this new government, which let's just charitably say hasn't gone perfectly well. The inexperience shines through, I think, from most of them. And when you look at...
I've just been listening to Kemi Badenoch do her Q&A thing with Christopher Hope, and she's had a brilliant line in that where she said, we weren't ready for the election, but they weren't ready for government. And
that's true.
Bang on.
Yeah. That's true. But how can you be ready for government if you've really got very little experience? So I was listening...
Tony Blair was.
Yeah, okay, well...
I mean, he had one or two people who'd been served in the 79 government, but not many, and that they had prepared for it properly. I don't think this lot had.
Well, I guess you've got to have a combination of people who... I mean, I was always... the president of my association was David Young. So Margaret Thatcher's cabinet minister, who brought her solutions, not problems. And he was a mentor of mine in the political world as well. When you look at how they used to have the makeup of cabinets, where they would be able to bring in some experience, and I think they've tried to ape that a little bit, because they've got some people in the Lords. Obviously, Jackie's gone off there, and people who've had some experience.
Don't remind me.
But they've got some people coming in from the Lords, but. It is important, I think, to have people with experience, and it's always struck me as quite a big difference between politics and business is people don't really have that much experience apart from political experience, and political experience is really about bringing down the opposition party, whoever it is that you're trying to win, whatever it is you're trying to win from. So it's more of a sort of polemicist as opposed to somebody who can construct and can build something, and I don't think we always really understand that. But they're not ready, I suppose. But I was listening to the business secretary the other day, and I've never really looked up Johnny Reynolds before, but I looked him up afterwards because he was there busy telling Amazon, the most successful company in the world, or one of them, about what their working from home policy should be. And I immediately thought, oh God, what you've got to let people run their own businesses. It's their risk capital, it's their employees, And then I looked him up. I mean, he became a special advisor at 23. He's never run anything in his life. I mean, how can you sort of have the audacity to sit there and tell one of the most successful companies in the world what their policy should be in terms of people who work in the office versus working from home, or anything else indeed? So that kind of annoys me.
No, I agree with that. We did, Jackie and I did one of these with Johnny Reynolds at the Labour Party conference 2 years ago. He was a revelation because, I mean, he's never, I think he's better at it now, but in the media he comes across as sort of a little bit stiff. But in that, oh my God, did he let loose? Couldn't believe it.
I always liked his style, his personal style, and I'd never really knew what he did.
And he listens to the podcast, by the way.
Oh, does he? Yeah. Oh, well, sorry, Johnny, but I thought you'd actually had some business experience, as you felt you ought to go on and tell the CEO of Amazon how to run his business.
So let's turn our attention to what's going on here. I mean, obviously, it seems to be a little bit more cheerful than I know. You've only just arrived, but it seems a lot more cheerful than I would have expected. There aren't as many people here as normal as you would expect. Certainly, the commercial exhibition is not as full as it is as it used to be. But again, you would expect that. Dominated by the leadership contest. Mm-hmm. If you'd won your seat, would you have been involved in it?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have stood myself, but...
Why not?
Because I've never thought that I would get the support. I think most people in the party feel that to get selected by the members, you need to be more right than I am. Now, I don't see myself as left or right, and I keep saying to people I am the most conservative thing to come out of Knowsley, and I've come up with my own views on pretty much everything.
That's a lot of competition.
Not a lot of competition, but, I do things, I'm very pragmatic and sort of solutions orientated. I'm not very ideological. I always think ideology is a luxury, really. Certainly it was when I was growing up, under Derek Hatton, obviously, running the council, and the unions destroying the business that I started my apprenticeship in. But that was just how I grew up, but I always felt that I wouldn't get the support at the membership stage. No, I'd be seen as too left.
Well, you see, I
too
think that's a
central.
misjudgment because...
I do, because the electorate's obviously the thing you need to judge
David
for as
Cameron,
well.
he won, and he wasn't seen as the right-wing candidate.
That's true, that's
I
true.
mean, Boris Johnson, I mean, he won for all sorts of reasons, but I don't think he wasn't seen... OK, he was seen as the pro-Brexit candidate.
Yes.
And you can't conflate being pro-Brexit with being right-wing, I don't
No, but it was the right-wing test of that day, of that time.
Because in my experience of the Conservative Party membership over the years has not been that they are this sort of little cabal of sort of right-wing zealots who will always vote for the... And they say, yeah, but they voted for Liz Truss over Rishi. Well, there are many reasons for that. And she successfully persuaded people that she was the future.
Well, there's some things that I observed, and I don't know your views on this, but this is the thing that I observed at the time. People are always looking to see who's going to win, and it's going to be the same here, right? Who's got momentum, who's got the biggest queues, who's got the most flashlights on the way in, pretending like there's paparazzi here waiting for them and all of that.
I got flashed on the way in, can you believe?
By a camera?
By a camera. No such luck. No, there was this whole phalanx of them outside the Hyatt Hotel. And I arrived on, when was it? Sometime on Saturday. And they were obviously waiting for one of the candidates, I don't know who. And as I walked in, there's like 3 or 4 of them started flashing. I said, God, are you that desperate? And they all laughed.
Well, yeah, I'll expect to see it somewhere soon. But there is this momentum, and there's a formula to it. It's really interesting to observe in terms of the momentum of the MPs, the opinion polls. Conhome's very important. And you look at Conhome, and I remember looking at it when Liz Truss was way ahead favourite because I couldn't understand it. And looking at how few people actually vote in that poll, and I think to be favourite, it was like less than 100 people had actually voted for you, but you would think that it was, a really important factor. And then you get people thinking, if this person gets it, then I need to be backing them early. And you've got all those mind games going on. I suppose it'll be a bit different this time because it's opposition as opposed to actual jobs of, being in cabinet, being in ministerial roles. But there are... The opinion polls, it's the same with the last election, have played a much bigger role than they ever have done before in forming and shaping opinion, even though they're completely wrong in many cases. They do, and they do for the way our party leadership has been chosen, I think.
So have you decided who you will vote for?
No. So I've said to them all who've asked me, look, I'm only a member now. I'm not an MP.
No, but your endorsement would count for something.
Yeah, but I've said to them, I don't think it's the right thing to do. When there's 2 of them left, then I'll obviously decide, and I'll probably I'll probably happily be open about who I'm backing. But it just seems wrong at this stage. And I think they're all good candidates, and I think they've all got room to grow in the role, but I think they've all got time to grow into the role. And I think the most important thing is the person who really, really understands that, because where we'll be when it comes to the next election is nowhere near where we are now, right? So this is something that we've got to grow. We've got to grow in terms of how we appeal to the electorate. We might be helped in, the government and the sort of, if they continue cocking up and making big mistakes on policy, and obviously the freebie row, which is a complete disaster for them, embarrassing for them. If they continue like that, then we may have more of a chance. But still, you've got 4.5 years to get ready.
What do you make of this row over the last 24 hours with Kemi Badenoch talking about maternity pay, allegedly saying it was excessive, although if you actually watched the interview, she was saying business regulation was excessive.
I think
But it's become a thing, hasn't it? A bit like the Andrea led something back in 2016 about the sort of, well, I'm a mother, I can understand things better, which again was a slightly confected row, I thought, at the time.
Yeah, although this is the opposite, right? Because Kemi actually is a mother. She's got young children. I mean, her youngest is really young. And I'm sure she's benefited from maternity pay. I couldn't believe that. I thought she's kind of said that because she's literally probably not long since enjoyed it. And of course she didn't say that, but it's quite clumsy what she is trying to say, and it sort of moves. She kind of moves with 2 different questions, and it gets conflated. And I suppose that is the reality of being in the media. I mean, it's so easy for people to misquote you. I mean, every single time I did the morning round, and I did it quite a lot, before you'd even got back into your office, it was, minister in car crash interview. And I'm thinking, well, that went all right. What are you talking about? And it'd be nothing. Half of it is because we have become content fodder for disrupted mainstream media, broadcast and mainstream media papers. That are obviously fighting for the advertising revenue with all the new platforms, influencers, promoters, podcasts, whatever. And we're like free content. It's why you hear wall-to-wall politics. Nobody's really interested in wall-to-wall politics, but we're kind of free content. And I suppose, whilst that's the environment, that's something that you can never win in the media as a politician.
Also, I think when you are in the spotlight at a conference like this, you've got to plan your programme properly to give you time to not be on the media. And I think, yesterday, for example, when I was up at God knows what time to do the Trevor Phillips show, be on their panel, and of course he had all the 4 candidates on. That was the first thing they'd done that day.
Yeah.
But for the rest of the day, it was basically constant media interviews. And inevitably, by the time she did the Times Radio one with Kate McCann, I suspect she was a bit knackered. Now, people say, oh yeah, well, you can't afford to be knackered. If you want to be Prime Minister, that's the 24/7 job. And that's true. But the media's very unforgiving, isn't it?
Yes. My own sort of big hot mic incident, which went viral, actually. It was the first time anyone knew who I was when I went into a school. It was so funny. People were saying, Miss, is that the woman from TikTok? I had to get a TikTok account to see what they were talking about. But that was at the same, right? The morning round, you start the first one at 6:30 and you do the last one at 9:30 and you've done whatever, 12:13. And obviously that was an off-the-cuff hot mic moment, and they decided it was too good to be true, so they used it. But
what did you do?
When I said, does anyone ever say you've done an effing good job when everyone's sat on their arse and done nothing? that one, which people still remember.
Was it fair that they put that out?
It was not expected they would at the time, because it was clearly after the interview had finished. And I don't know what the golden cold is for journalists.
Who was the interviewer?
Somebody that isn't a normal one. He was interviewing because he'd done some programmes on the concrete rack. Dan, somebody from ITV, not somebody you would normally have.
Daniel Hewitt.
I don't know. I guess it was. I've not seen him since. I wouldn't do an interview with him again. Not that he'd ask now, but he, but it was in the too good to be true pile. And to be honest, I said, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. That's at least it was authentic. I actually did, and I was being quite sarcastic, right?
Yeah.
So, as well, because you can tell that afterwards. But it really went on for weeks afterwards. Then that went on for weeks afterwards because they can.
But the kids at the school would have thought respect.
Oh, the kids in the school. I actually, when you go to a school, it's so funny. I went to a school in the election campaign and all these kids are asking me for selfies. I'm like, I have literally banned mobile phones. What are you doing with your phones? Well, they said, well, we just brought them out because you were coming. I was like, really? So, get them away. But they definitely, you used to try and, you spend the first 5 minutes explaining what an education secretary did. But because it had got on TikTok, they kind of knew you from that anyway.
I always slightly dread doing school visits.
I love them. I love them.
Once I'm there, I really enjoy it and always have a good time. And there's always some cheeky little monkey in the front row who wants to sort of make their mark. And it's always hugely entertaining. Yeah,
no, I love them. And the reality is, because I always enjoyed school myself. Our school was certainly a challenge in terms of, it was a failing comprehensive school in Knowsley, which is kind of famous for not having great education, and still no sixth forms, funnily enough. But they do have a college.
No sixth forms in the whole borough?
In the whole borough, yeah, because Not many. Well, when I was at school, only 92% of the kids, 90% didn't get the 4 or 5 GCSEs or O levels as they were. So there wasn't enough of a pipeline to really keep a sixth form going. So you'd have it for a few years and then it'd go, and then one school would have one and then it'd go. So it wasn't really thriving. But there is a college there now, which has been there about 20 years or more, but not in time for when I left school. Which is an outstanding college, and they do A levels. So you can go to St Helens to Carmel College or St Helens College and do A levels. But yeah, but that meant that the school. I mean, I love the school, and I'm still very good friends with lots of people in the school. But it was. We never had anybody like that come in, but I can imagine if they did. I actually went back to visit it. The school's now back on a new site, and I went back to visit it because it's just got good for the first time. There's now 3 good schools in Knowsley, so yeah, it's on the up.
Let's move away from talking about British politics, because obviously the big international story at the moment is what's going on in Gaza and Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And as we speak now, the Israeli Air Force have been hitting Beirut again today, and everyone's saying this is a precursor to a ground invasion. No idea whether that's true or not. And then you have Western countries saying, oh, there must be a ceasefire. And you think, well, are they doing this just to sort of feel good about themselves? Because there is no prospect of a ceasefire. It's a totally unrealistic thing, in my view. And yet every president and prime minister sort of feels the need to sort of keep calling for one, even when they know that it won't happen. What's the point of it?
Well, I mean, escalation can happen very easily, right? And what they're trying to, I think there was a call for a sort of a time-defined ceasefire, so that it literally takes the momentum out of the escalation. So I would imagine that's what they're trying to do. But it is incredibly difficult because, of course, Hezbollah have been, bombing Israel for months now, and obviously Israel have been retaliating as well. So, and they're fighting on all sides. So it is almost impossible. I mean, I don't know what's happening with Qatar. Last time I was close to this, or I wasn't that close, but there was a group in Qatar and Egypt and the US that were trying to get a deal for the hostages to come out, a ceasefire for the hostages and for aid to go in. And even that deal has not yet been done, the second one. So I think it seems like at the moment there isn't on either side the appetite to meet the necessary conditions for a ceasefire, because everyone says a ceasefire, but including the hostages coming home and including the aid going in and including the conditions for those to be met have to be agreed by people who don't seem to be in the mood to agree those, or don't trust each other, I guess, is the other factor.
I keep thinking that the rules that people set for Israel are totally different to the rules that they set for these terrorist groups, and I've never understood this, where people say, well, Israel must not hit back against Hezbollah. Well, why not? They are a terrorist group. They're prescribed in this country. And yet apparently they should not have bombed the Hezbollah headquarters and killed the leader, who I read on Twitter from some idiot who says, oh, well, he only wanted peace. I'm thinking, well, it's a funny way of showing you want peace if you keep sending the bombs across into Israel and then make inflammatory statements on the television. And yet Israel is supposed to just suck this up.
I mean, you've just got to look at the facts. Hamas and Hezbollah are prescribed terrorist organisations. And the events on October the 7th, which were the start of this, I mean, obviously there's been lots of things in the past as well, where Hamas, invading Israel and, killing and injuring thousands of people and taking hostages. I mean, they didn't, they're sat there basically getting it from all sides. So of course they're going to hit back. And I mean, we don't really know. I don't know if they've fully claimed, the pages, who's done that, but everybody thinks it's probably Mossad, right?
Yeah, and again, there's double standards there, because people say, oh well, Israel's been totally indiscriminate in Gaza. Well, you can't get much more targeted than blowing
pages
up 3,000 pages of the terrorists.
of the terrorists.
I mean,
Yeah.
I thought it was genius, personally.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with those guys, right? I mean, they literally, obviously, have very smart people, but it's gone on so long, and I guess what's concerning is what happens next. You know, does this start to really escalate in the Middle East? Because if that happens, then, you know, it's not. There's lots of uncertainty in geopolitics. You know, obviously with Russia and Ukraine, and obviously Iran. I mean, it really does feel as though things could escalate, and that would be a disaster for everyone. There's no winners.
Did you feel when you were in cabinet that I mean, what was it, 2.5 years, something like that, that foreign affairs took up an increasing amount of cabinet meeting time?
Yes, I guess so, but I don't really have anything to compare it with. I suppose if I'd have been in the earlier cabinets, Brexit would have dominated, but certainly, and the pandemic, when I was first a minister, completely dominated, and I'm sure that dominated cabinet. I wasn't a cabinet minister then, I was in education, then in health. And you know, and that's another thing when you think about the experience. You know, I was 1 month before, 3 weeks a minister before the pandemic struck. And when you listen now to conversations, you would think the pandemic never happened. And it was massive, closing down the world's economy, closing down the hospitals, the GPs, you know, only doing things via a little hole in the wall kind of thing. I mean, it's just off the scale what we did. And of course, the impacts of that are going to go on for a long time. You see it in all countries around the world in many different areas. But I guess my part of it, it was much more a discussion about, the events, the external events that were impacting cabinet discussions were probably more foreign policy, as they'd been pandemic and Brexit before that.
Rosie Duffield.
Yes.
She's quit Labour, she's quit the Labour whip. I don't know whether that means she's no longer a member of the Labour Party, and she's been saying some pretty strong stuff about Keir Starmer. In some ways, it's surprising that she's lasted this long, given the amount of abuse that she's had, particularly from people within the Labour Party, about her view on gender identity and trans issues. Do you know her at all? I
do know her, yeah. I mean, she's lovely, so you always talk to her. There's like a ladies' members' room, and you can go and do a bit of ironing in there or stuff like that if you've got a crease or something. So I used to see her in there a fair bit, just chat to her there. And yeah, she's very brave. And it does take bravery in politics if you've got a view that not everybody has the same view, particularly in your party. But what I think is really interesting about Rosie is, she was very much more of our party view in terms of self-ID and the fact that, we had to really clearly protect women's rights and safe spaces. And then she was absolutely vilified. And then everybody came to that viewpoint after the Hillary Cass reports and some of the stuff that had been going on in the NHS, etc. Suddenly everybody kind of moved to that viewpoint, and instead of embracing her and saying you were right, they didn't. They just kind of made out as though they'd felt this all along. So I guess that's probably pissed her off. And then, I suppose some of the freebie stuff, which is embarrassing. I think it's, I can't get over a 62-year-old man having somebody else buy his glasses. It blows my mind. My husband's 62. We've just been to get him new glasses. What goes through your mind? It's quite a personal item, right? Clothes and glasses.
This thing should have gone to Specsavers.
Literally. It blows my mind. But all of that stuff, I guess she's there's no love lost between her and Keir Starmer.
No, there really isn't. Barry Gardner was on my show a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, a couple that earn £220,000 between them, can you explain to my listeners why they can't afford to buy their own clothes? And to Barry's credit, he said, no.
You can't.
It's impossible, isn't it?
I don't understand it, and I don't know. I've never heard of it, even when I was in government or cabinet. I've never heard of it. You get invited to some concerts, and of course you'll take a judgment about whether you think that's right or connected to your job or not, or whether you've got time. I don't know where they get the time from, but clothes, never known it.
I think Margaret Thatcher used to be loaned dresses from like Aquascutum or whatever. But that's I think different, and I get it. If you're, and I mean, she wasn't, or her husband wasn't short of a bob or two, I suppose. But I mean, Theresa May did not come from a moneyed background. I think her husband works in the city, but they've never struck me as people who are sort of like ultra rich. And I think she got loaned a few things as well. I don't see any problem with that. But to actually be given something is rather different.
Well, if you remember Theresa May's clothing story, she actually wore a pair of leather trousers on a photo shoot, didn't even go home in them, and made front page news. And literally, she just put them on for a photograph. So, I mean, that is the difference between that and, you know, taking tens of thousands of pounds worth of free clothes is, I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. I think it's probably a bit of a one-off.
Who is, when you're a cabinet minister, who is your best junior minister?
Oh God, I mean,
What makes a good junior minister? I mean, you were a junior minister for some time.
They're all different. So I mean, you know, I had Nick Gibb doing school standards. I mean, he had been along the journey for the whole sort of school reforms from opposition. So he'd been working with Michael Gove since 2005. So he understood it completely, and he also understood some of the problems with the curriculum going off in the way that they did in Wales and Scotland, which have led to much poorer outcomes. But then on the other hand, I had Claire Coutinho, and Claire Coutinho was you know, somebody who'd worked inside the Treasury. So if you wanted to find some extra money for something, or find some way of persuading somebody that you could spend a particular pot of money, then she was brilliant at doing that. And then I had Damien Hines, who had been the Secretary of State.
That must have been quite awkward, though.
Well, it wasn't, because he's such a big person. He is such a great guy and a big person that, you know, and now he's the Shadow Secretary. I've just seen him actually because
as a cabinet minister, you don't get to say who your junior minister is going to be. I mean, you might have a bit of influence with one or two, but generally you don't. And I mean, if I'd been you, I'd thought, well, what are they putting him in there for? Is that to keep an eye on me or something?
Oh, I never thought like that. Not at all.
You're a better person than me.
Well, yes, and to be honest, I'm not insecure from that perspective either. I'm very happy to sort of say things, but I never thought like that. Plus, I know him well. He's actually a neighbouring MP. I know him well. You can have a very straightforward conversation with him. He's from Manchester, I'm from Liverpool. There's no kind of you know, we don't look in the mirror and think that, you know, the answer's staring back at us kind of thing. So we're very pragmatic people. And he's doing the job now as the Shadow. So, yeah, no, that wasn't a problem at all. And then I had Robert Halfon. I mean, literally, I had such a good team.
I saw him last night.
Yeah, and, you know, he'd been the chair of the Education Select Committee. And then suddenly, you know, he's a minister, and he'd been championing apprenticeships even longer than I had.
Yeah.
And so I just felt everybody, it's all about a team. And what you need to have is people who are, you know, just willing to work well as a team, respect each other. I have been very lucky, but I think there's, you know, other teams where people haven't said they'll do the morning round, particularly when it's a tricky day, and, you know, sometimes you have to do it. And, you know, sometimes people say, no, I'm not doing it, whatever. But my team were all very collaborative, and, you know, we all worked and did whatever we could. And we believed in what we'd done. We believed in our reforms. We believed in the apprenticeship system we'd built. We believed in the college system, which we'd really built up, and then the school standards. We really believed in it. And higher education, of course, there's a lot of discussion about higher education now. But also, you know, we believed that, you know, we had the right balance between the higher education, the government funding, but also the freedoms for them to be able to build their business, as it were.
I think I'm coming to do a literary festival near you.
Petworth?
Yeah, I'm doing that on the Saturday the 26th of October.
Ah, right. Well, you should come.
The day after I'll probably have lost my licence.
Why?
I'm up before the beak.
What have you done?
Totting up. And I'm pleaded not guilty to one of them, which that's why I've got to go to court. Because it was coming out of London. Well, I won't go into the detail, but they reduced the speed limit from 70 to 40 on this road without actually telling anybody.
Yeah.
And thousands of people have been done for this. and the signage isn't correct, I don't think. So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to contest this.
And are other people? Is it like a class action thing?
It's not a class action. I think other people are as well, but we're doing it individually. But I've actually hired a specialist law firm who specialise in sort of traffic stuff.
That loophole Nick stuff with that guy.
It is his company, but it's not actually him.
All right.
So we'll see how that goes. But that's the day before, so I might have to get a lift.
Well, get the train to Hazelmere. I'll pick you up.
Hazelmere, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll pick you up, or Pulborough, and you can stay at ours. So.
Well, that's very kind.
Yeah.
So I've then got to go to Yeovil the next day. So I'm now having to. I do.
That's going to be a pain for you because you do a lot of travelling.
I do, but I am doing a lot more by train than I used to.
Yeah.
Because I don't like driving at night anymore, which makes me sound very old.
It is.
Yeah,
it does.
I know.
It is a defining moment.
It is. So
you need new glasses. Apparently, there's this fella, Lord Ali. He'll do night vision as well.
I don't mind driving on motorways at night, but I don't like doing country lanes at night anymore.
But where I live, you've got no choice.
I know.
If you want to get home, that's
right.
the thing. They have this habit, though, which is really annoying lately, of just closing those roads at night.
Yeah, I know.
And literally, I'd gone to, I can't remember which one, to help another candidate in the election. I went and helped lots of people, and I ended up losing my seat. Lots of people kept theirs, but that's fine. But they just closed like one road, and then they closed another road. And literally, I went 2 hours out of my way to get back. So, yeah, you do have to be careful because they do have a habit of just closing the road.
Do. Right, let's move on to some questions. Here's a Twitter question from Joseph Bryant, who's a regular listener. Why is more time at school spent on STEM? Why don't kids get to do more PE given rising obesity? Why aren't more kids given the chance to learn an instrument or be in the theatre? Why don't they learn about X period of history? I jest, but is the school day long enough?
Right, well, first of all, the school curriculum, our teachers and head teachers in particular have a lot of autonomy. So if you go to a school in some parts of the world, they'll be doing the same thing in the same, in France, for example, and Spain. In Spain, the head teacher doesn't even get to choose all of the teachers, even hire all the teachers. So you see these very centrally run systems. Ours is not. It's quite autonomous, which is actually why Ofsted is important, because there is a lot more autonomy in terms of the curriculum. I mean, obviously you've got guidelines within the curriculum, and obviously you've got certain things that you have to teach, and obviously you've got exams at the end of the day, but they do have quite a lot of autonomy of how they set their day up. So I've been in loads of classrooms where the kids will ask this, why can't we do more of this? And I say, ask your head teacher, because actually it's not me that sets this, it's him or her. So they do have a lot of autonomy.
And they're looking daggers at you as you say it.
You've got to take accountability. You can't have all this accountability without taking responsibility for it. But one of the things that I think, and people do get a bit defensive when we talk about STEM, and the reason they do is because they always think it's an attack on the arts and on music and on English and on literature and on culture and on sport, and it isn't. And the reason we talk about it is actually fewer people do STEM. So if you look at how many people graduate with non-STEM degrees, it's more than graduate with STEM degrees. So we were actually trying to put the balance back on STEM, not only because it's an important skill, but also because it's harder, and we wanted to ensure more people did maths, for example, to 18. And I am delighted actually that maths is now the number one A level. And you say to kids, if you do maths, you will earn more. They're like, okay then, and many, many more children are now doing it. So I think it's not really as it's portrayed, but maybe because we talk about STEM more, because we're trying to make sure it is balanced.
Sex education is always a real sort of hot topic during your time. Apparently, you can teach about fisting in sex education now. According to one of my colleagues, apparently this is a big story today. I haven't seen it, so I don't know the details, but I mean, that can't be right, surely.
It's definitely not right. And one of the things that I did, and I had the...
Don't ask me to explain it.
I had the pleasure and the pain of having to do this, which was...
What, fisting?
No, that would definitely be just pain. Of doing the review of the relationship, sex and health education and putting it into age brackets. And we got a panel, actually, an expert panel that put all this together, and we put some guidance in place, and then the election was called. So what I don't know is what the current Education Secretary and that team will do with this, because what it was clear, we introduced relationships and sex and health education, made it compulsory in, I think it was September 21 when it became compulsory. It was introduced about a year before. And that was actually during the pandemic. And then we had all these stories of these inappropriate things being taught. And we thought that we needed to go further, actually, based on all of the research that we did. And we did go to the effort of going and saying, these are the sort of things that should be taught, these are the things that should not be taught, and these are what's age appropriate, and then how you deal with questions. And it was a good piece of work. So if I had been there still, that would have been introduced, and I would urge them to do it, because it is new that it's become compulsory. It was done during the pandemic, and there's a lot of reports of parents, and that was the other thing we introduced, which was complete transparency for parents, so parents always know what their child is being taught. It's really important, because we've got 22,500 schools, 3,000 or 4,000 of those are secondary schools, which is most of where this is, a debate. But you can't keep an eye on 4,000 schools every moment of the day. So
right.
Parents need to be able to be part of it.
Jonathan Allen says, you were the 10th Secretary of State for Education in 14 years. As a school governor, can you understand how I felt that the Conservative Party didn't take education seriously?
I don't think that's a correct characterisation, because if you look at the education reforms, it shows how seriously we took education. However, it is fair to say that the turmoil of the different leaders, Brexit, obviously we lost 2 prime ministers over that, and then the different leaders meant that we did have turmoil, not just in education, but in many of the roles. There was, because then we had the Boris resignation, that was another farce, so I think we had an education secretary for 2 days. So I can understand the frustration.
Step forward, Michelle Donlan.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration with all of that, although, I did stay in until the electorate threw us out. But I think it wasn't because we were not taking it seriously, it was all the other events that were going on that we were trying to navigate, not least Brexit, the pandemic, and then obviously what happened with Boris and Liz and then Rishi.
Liz has apparently said at a fringe meeting here today that not only would she back the new Argentinian president, Mr. Vilel, something like that, who's considered very far right, she would back him if he were running for Tory leader. She's also said that she would have done much better in the election than Rishi Sunak. Gillian Keegan, your views, please.
When she asked me to back her, I said, no, Liz. She said, why not? I said, because you're crackers and I haven't changed my view.
You actually said that
I actually
to her?
said that, yeah.
What did she do?
She just blinked. That's the way she does. I don't think she could quite believe it, but she is. I just don't know I can't. I mean, I say about being quite logical, and there's few gaps there. I mean, everyone's entitled to their views, but she seems to be going out of her way to... she supported anybody who's seen as authoritarian or quite right-wing or, she's going out of her way to be controversial.
She's on a little journey somehow, but I'm not quite sure what the destination is.
I would imagine it's related to earnings. The US is a big market, Argentina is a big market.
Right, Harry Aldridge says, hi Ian and Gillian, I'm really excited and a bit nervous to be starting at university next week. I was wondering what you had both made of the reports over the weekend that maintenance grants could be reintroduced and tuition fees could rise to 10,500 over the next 5 years. Well, I'm afraid, Harry, you're going to be in for a shock, because tuition fees are going to rise, but I suspect it's going to be for a damn sight more than 10,500.
Possibly. And I mean, maintenance grants, when they had maintenance grants, when I was younger, there was basically numbers caps. There was only sort of 8-10% of young people went to university, so no one from Knowsley without the A-level provision. Not many people went anyway. A few of them will have got a chance to go via some means or another. But Maintenance grants, I remember looking into it at the time, and even our family, so my dad was working full-time, there's 3 of us within 3 years, and mum was part-time secretary, but we had, there was no money, but they wouldn't have qualified. So I think people will have higher...
I did qualify for one.
Did you?
Yeah.
How?
I don't really know. I mean, I grew up on a farm. My father was a farmer, so everybody thinks farmers are rich. And
actually, they're not normally.
They're not. And I mean, ours was quite a small farm, and I think that their annual income was probably
below the threshold. Actually, that's
way
true.
Below the
that can be true for farming.
Yeah. So I think I can't even remember what it was, but it wasn't an awful lot.
Yeah.
But it covered your basic living accommodation, I think. But then the rent there, I think it was £180 a term.
Oh, right.
I mean, okay, this was 45 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously I did a degree apprenticeship, which I think are just an amazing answer to lots of questions. But we were not going to put up tuition fees for 2 reasons. The first was because tuition fees had gone up a lot. So people always peg it from 2014, I think, when it was 9,250. Yeah. But actually, if you go back to 2008, it was whatever it was, £3,000, and then before that it was zero. So it actually has gone up a lot.
People forget, they think the Conservatives introduced tuition fees. It wasn't, it was Tony Blair.
Yeah, but we put them up to be more reflective of the costs.
As I like to put it, Vince Cable put them up.
Yeah, he did. And he did, after saying he wouldn't. But here's the deal. They have had a massive increase in numbers. So from going to, probably less than 20% of the population, now it's 45% of young people. Then we've also had the growth in international students. So they're happy to take all the growth, but they don't have all of the disciplines in place. There's been very little restructuring in this sector. And one of the things I looked at quite a few of the business cases where people had taken massive loans and debt, and that's what's causing some of them to have a problem now because they've got higher interest rates. But you can't just do that.
Why are they interest rates so? I mean, it's 7% on student loans. I mean, that's almost wicked.
Well, actually, we took off. It used to be 3%. On top of RPI, and I took off the plus 3%, so it's just RPI. But of course, RPI went up, so but that will be going back down again now. So inflation rates will go back down. So there's different plans. and different. So the last plan did have RPI plus 3%. This current one is only RPI, so we took off the plus 3% because that was irritating people as well. The interest rates, it's almost like it's moving away from you every time, and it's very demoralising. But I think universities they've never really looked at themselves. Some will say they have, and some of the better ones will have done. But I've seen a lot of business cases where everybody's assumed very optimistic student numbers and borrowed a lot of money. And, you just can't do that without having the accountability. And it's not just for, young people to be continually to pay this. There was supposed to be more of a market. Originally, there was supposed to be more of a market. There is no market whatsoever. It's a flat fee, and we need to understand, because it's kind of a faux market with the worst of all worlds. So I do think we do need to. I'd already set up some financial analysts within the Department for Education to be able to work through what we need to do. We did it in the college sector. So we had the same in the college sector, and we basically got some restructuring within the college sector, which I think has made it a healthier sector.
Just seen Simon Case has announced that he's quitting as Cabinet Secretary. Do you have any dealings with him?
I did, yeah. I don't know him super well, but I actually probably got to speak to him mostly when I was very lucky enough to go to the tea party at Buckingham Palace and take my mum, which was one of the huge privileges, and I'm so glad I got to do that. And he was on the same day, and so my mum talks to everyone, so he was talking to me. Apart from you now. Well, you've got a chance to be. She's a very forgiving person.
Is she?
She is. She's lovely. She's funny.
Sorry to Gillian's mum.
Jackie.
Yeah. Sorry, Jackie. I didn't really mean it.
Tell her you love
Although
Liverpool.
I'm going to still say I don't particularly like the Beatles, because I don't.
But you love Liverpool and Scousers.
Yeah. Yes.
You're looking at one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love some Scousers just as I love some people from Manchester or Newcastle or Glasgow.
Absolutely.
But this is what I got into a lot of trouble a few years ago when I wrote a piece about the Adelphi Hotel, which I had the misfortune of staying in.
They had a whole programme on the
I know,
Adelphi Hotel.
and I actually stayed in it as a result of that, because I thought, anyway. And
it made Faulty Towers look good, right?
It really did. The only Wi-Fi was available in the lobby, nothing in the rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, that was quite a few years ago now. And I made some comments about when you drive into Liverpool, there are still some Second World War bomb sites that haven't been sort of renovated, which I thought didn't give the city a particularly brilliant impression. But I then said, I think the docks area is fantastic, and blah, blah, blah. And it was as if you weren't allowed to utter any criticism. And I said, well, if I say that I like one city over another, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's the right opinion, that's just the impression that I've got. But oh my God, I had to go on Radio City and explain myself.
I actually used to be a member of the gym in the Adelphi, which was hysterical.
Couldn't you afford anything better?
Well, probably not at the time. I mean, I was probably about 17, 18. It was actually good. It had a pool, which is why I did it. And yeah, I used to go to the gym there. And I mean, they used to have a nightclub as well. I think it was called Fridays, actually. And you always ended up going there because actually the queue for the taxi was the other side of the Adelphi. But on Grand National Day, it is hysterical. I mean, it is the Mecca. It is a funny place to go. But no, the only thing you can say you don't like in Liverpool is Everton. I'll get in trouble.
I have always been quite pro both Liverpool and Everton.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting on the fence. I mean, Everton at the moment, I mean, surely even Liverpool supporters want them to survive, because I mean, they're going through some terrible financial times. I listened to the Price of Football podcast. I've been following all of this. And I mean, I don't know how they're going to get out of it, but I really hope they do.
Well, I always say it's red for football, blue for politics. A few of them got the wrong memo.
Now, Jersey Phillip has got a good one. He says, what experiences with trade unions in Gillian's life in Liverpool encouraged her to become a Conservative?
Loads. I mean, that is actually... So when I started work age 16, I mean, you know, Knowsley is completely Labour, really. So I would have probably, if anyone would have asked me, I'd have thought I was Labour. No one was really that political. Although my great-grandmother was a big Labour activist, but, you know, she was dead by the time I was about 8 or 9. I started work in this car factory, which was a sub-assembly plant in Kirby, part of General Motors Group. And you know, there's been a whole sort of change of just in time, which had happened. It actually started in Tokyo, and you know, it was slowly filtering through to the rest of the car industry. And to be competitive, you had to change a lot of the working practices. And they just refused. They kept downing tools, going on strike. And I used to say to them, "You're going on strike as though you're the only place in the world that you can make a car part." We're not. And all these jobs, every 5 or 7 years, you used to have to rebid anyway, because it was a new model. They'd change a lot of the lines, so it was a big investment cycle. And I said, it'll all go somewhere else, and of course that's what happened. It did. After I left, actually, it did sort of limp on for a bit longer, but then it closed down. And I always looked at what they did very dispassionately, because I didn't have a view on unions before, and thought, this makes no sense. You're leveraging with your own demise. Where do you think you're going with this? And of course they went nowhere with it, and a lot of people lost their jobs, which was really poor, really bad for the area. So I really haven't. I mean, you do find some constructive unions. I worked in Germany, France, Spain, across Europe for many years. I used to run big teams of people across those lots of countries in Europe, and you'd quite often have to deal with what they call workers' councils, and there'd be unions on various boards and different parts of the structures. They were more constructive, but they didn't, you know, they weren't going out on strike every 5 minutes. And then, of course, I had to deal with the teachers' strike, which, you know, was again difficult, because they'd actually, you heard a lot about the independent pay review bodies just because of what's happened recently. They went on strike before I'd even been given what the independent pay review body was recommending. They went on strike before I'd even been given the exam question. And I'm like, how can you be going on strike when I haven't even been given the exam?
If I remember this right, you actually made quite an effort to get to know the union leaders when
I've just seen one here,
appointed,
actually.
Have you?
Yeah.
Have a happy reunion.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I get on with everyone. I always try to find one thing I like about people, you know, if there's lots of things I don't. But yeah, I mean, you know, I got 2 billion quid, which was the first letter on my desk, which was from the unions, all 4 of them. We need this 2 billion for inflation pressures, for the previous pay rise. So I got that. And then They went on strike before I'd even been given the next exam question. So that's when I knew it was more political, and it was. And of course, the teachers didn't really know that. The teachers thought that it was about school funding, actually, because they had a big school cuts, even though we were spending more on schools than we ever have. But it's still, there's a lot of pressure on schools with special educational needs, and we knew we were building 60,000 more SEND places. I think we got 35,000 delivered, but I don't know whether those they seem to be cancelling quite a lot of our capital build projects, so I don't know whether they're continuing with those or not. But that's really important because that's putting a lot of extra pressure on funding for schools.
Luke has a very different question. It's on an email. He says, as you were the MP for Chichester, did you ever have the pleasure of meeting fellow Scouser Dame Patricia Routledge, a.k.a. Hyacinth Bouquet? Dame Patricia lives in Chichester. If so, what was it like?
Yeah, I did. In fact, when I first was selected as the candidate in 2017, I was summoned for an interview with her.
Oh, really?
At her house, yeah. So
wow.
I went and had a cup of tea, and she asked me lots of questions and put a slide rule over me, and I think I got sort of a nod of approval. And then I was really lucky. I met her again, but even more than meeting her, I met the Queen at Chichester Festival Theatre later on in 2017 after I was elected.
I've performed there.
It's an amazing place, isn't it?
I hosted an evening with Christine Hamilton.
Wow.
Can you believe?
Last time you said something like that, it was Anne Widdecombe. Did you do her there as well?
I used to do both of them. Or was it? No, I'm sure it was Christine Hamilton though.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing place, and I got to go along as the MP. And again, this is your timing, right? The guy who'd been the MP for 20 years, the Queen never visited, so he'd not met her. And then suddenly I'm there, and a few months later she does. And Dame Patricia Routledge was invited to the same lunch that I was there, and she did some readings because. But we've had Dame Maggie Smith was also she's local to the area. She's not in that constituency, but she's local to the area. There's a lot of thespians around there. Hugh Bonneville, he was a constituent. So there's quite a lot of actors. You go to Chichester Festival Theatre and you see as many people in the audience who are actors as you do on the stage who are actors.
Right, this is not really a question, but it's the final comment from John. No, it isn't. It's where is it? From LC, who says, no, we've done that one. Johannes J. Tell Gillian she did a good fucking job. So one person has said that to you now.
Oh, I get that a lot, but mostly sarcastically. I mean, it's a good job. It's kind of a natural thing that I would say, right? This is what I do normally say. But it is. There's a new card. There's a card that somebody sent me, which is a new job card. I think it's from Funky Pigeon or one of them, and it's got like this cartoon picture of me and sort of, good luck, make sure you do a effing good job. So
well, that's one to be framed on the loo wall, isn't it?
Well, I've got on the loo wall, which is actually in the garden loo, because I refused to have it because my husband thought it was a good idea to buy for Christmas a picture of me as a cartoon with a concrete head. And I said to him, what are you doing? He said, well, this is what politicians do. They put like things up in their bathrooms. I'm like, not me. Get it out of the garage.
Anne Widdecombe, her whole loo is just covered in the most hideous cartoons of her, mainly by Martin Rowson.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't buy it now.
Garden loo, that's a bit grand.
It is because, this is my husband's now doing his PhD in writing books. So we built this shed, and I said, well, look, if we're going to do this, we should put a loo there. So when we have parties, we can just open up that loo. So that was our kind of compromise. So I got something out of his shed, which is now a library where he writes his books. So yeah, but that's where they'll now find all sorts of political cartoons in there. But yeah, it's. I suppose that'll be the end of those. At least I got one or two.
I think it's a great accolade when you get cartoons done of you. In fact, Martin Rowson did a cartoon for me for my 50th birthday, and it's the detail in them. I mean, I don't know how long it took him, but it must have been hours. And all my staff, I don't know what they paid for it, but he didn't do it as a freebie because, of course, we can't do freebies, can we?
No, definitely
not. Anyway, Gillian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Talking about big 50th birthday present, so when I had my 50th birthday party, I just want to make sure everyone knows that I paid for it myself. 100 people, and you pay for it yourself. This is another thing. You know, I don't know where people get off thinking other people should pay for their lifestyle. You fit your lifestyle to match your earnings. But it has been fab, and and I'm looking forward now to catching up with everybody. I've got a dinner tonight, but catching up with everyone at conference.
Good stuff. Well, I've got to do a show, and I've got to interview Andrew Griffith in a moment, so we'd better say goodbye. Thank you so much for coming on, and join us again.
See you in Petworth.
You will. Well, if you come, and do join us again tomorrow for Penny Mordaunt, and then maybe another one later in the week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to For the Many, a Global Player original podcast. Do join me for my evening radio show on LBC, 7 to 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday.